As the NATO attacks on Libya continue, U.S., French, and British forces have been escalating their bombings. Now, these have not only targeted legitimate military targets in Libya, but they have also deliberately targeted the civilian population. What the U.S. has said publicly was that the civilian population needed to distance itself from the Gaddafi regime, meaning don't go near any government buildings, don't use any government services like water, medical care, and stuff like that. Now, this was made very clear on the 22nd when NATO forces killed 9 people who worked for the state water company. The NATO message is very clear. Do not support your government, no matter what. You will do what we say or you will die. Now, this is obviously a very anti-Libyan people stance against the population itself. They're dissuading people from using government sources of necessary government services like water. After all, they killed 9 people who work for the public water service. Now, this is clearly showing the true intention of NATO. This entire war is for entirely NATO interests, not the interests of the people, which shows that this is definitely going to turn into a long-term occupation, as it has done with Iraq and as it has done with Afghanistan. Now, this stance is being covered up with politically acceptable statements. U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates has gone out and he said that President Obama has ordered the use of drone strikes, unmanned vehicles, to conduct strikes against the Libyan government and Libyan military forces because of the precision for which they can strike, and thus telling everybody how much care they're taking for the Libyan people in this war. However, anyone with even a fleeting knowledge of military history, recent military history, knows how precise these drone attacks and so-called smart bombs are. It's almost an insult to the people that they're even trying to portray themselves as taking civilian life into account when they make these attacks. Not only is this a war against the Libyan population, but this is also a war against the American people themselves. According to a recent New York Times CBS poll, 45% of Americans are against the conflict in Libya, while 39% are undecided. Now, this clearly shows that the majority of the population does not support this conquest in any way, shape, or form. I think to continue this, saying that the American people want to bring freedom to this country, despite the fact that the people are against the war, is an insult to even the facade that is U.S. democracy. Despite the surface of appearance, the imperialist powers in this situation are still fighting with each other over the access to the resources, the oil resources that will come about as a result of this war. That is exactly why no comprehensive plan by NATO has been put forward for the use of ground troops, because each side is fighting to get their troops to go into the areas where the oil wealth is situated. And because of this, no plan has come up. And I think this also is a more telling sign that this is not a war for the Libyan people, but for the wealth of the rich elite. The most determined to take care of the situation is France. The French Foreign Ministry has already demanded that there be a space set up in Misrata where French troops can deliver humanitarian aid to the Libyan people. However, the UK Ministry of Defense has already said that that's not possible at this time and they're not considering it. Regardless of what the UK Ministry of Defense has to say, sending in ground troops to Libya will be absolutely necessary. Weeks of NATO bombings have weakened the Libyan military, but has not destabilized the Gaddafi government. The main reason for this lack of destabilization is a lack of support for the NATO bombings by the people of Libya. Already, it has been assessed that thousands of people have already died in this conflict. U.S. sources say they have depleted 30 to 40% of the Libyan military, and given the size of the Libyan military, we know that thousands of people must have already died from these attacks. Many U.S. sources have already been quoted as saying that they think the situation might drag out into a giant stalemate like in Afghanistan and Iraq. Such a stalemate on the horizon will no doubt require the NATO forces to step up killing in order to win the country over, exactly as John McCain has been advocating while he was there. More and more people are going to die because of the profit motive and the virtuousness of the selfishness of those seeking to exploit the country for plunder. This situation can only come to an end by the distribution of energy resources according to need under a socialist program. This war is entirely, completely, obviously driven by the profit motive for the wealth of a few privileged elite.